Yeah, they tune in, it's the thedewbash, rolling deep. Mic check like that, file, let's hit a beat. Voices flowing like the river, knowledge on the spree. Every episode of Journey, come ride with me. Just hit play, it's a vibe, can't you see? The thedewbash, we breaking it down. From the underground to the top of the town. Life's effects, intertwined, wearing the crown. Podcast kings and queens, we wearing the gown.
Now, the thedewbash is back, and tonight we're going to discuss one of my favorite movies or movie franchises of all time, the Friday the 13th franchise. I grew up loving this franchise of movies. You know, love Michael Myers. He's my second all-time favorite movie hero, but I have to say Jason is probably my number one. What do you guys think, Matt? What do you think about Friday the 13th? How does it stack up?
Man, I think Friday. Let's just be clear for one. Had it not been for Halloween, you wouldn't have Friday the 13th.
I think that's
I
true.
just don't see that happening because I think when Halloween came out, it set a new standard for what modern horror is now as far as franchises go. But I think Friday the 13th took a really cool idea, putting a serial killer in a camp environment, and man, that was great. I mean, because just like Halloween made it to where you look at Halloween and it's like really spooky, and you can't think of Halloween without the Michael Myers stuff now. Much like Texas Chainsaw Massacre, I can't hear a chainsaw unless I think of that movie.
Yeah, no doubt.
Freddy, when you go to sleep, nightmares, you think about Freddy, and Friday the 13th, you think about summer camp. So I think it stacks up really good as far as not just horror franchises, but franchises in cinema history. I think it stacks up really well.
But you know what I think really was the appeal for the Friday the 13th franchise, and we talked about this back when we done the summer blockbuster show. I think when you take a slasher movie and you set it in a summer camp setting, it's summertime. You've got the whole boys and girls theme going on where they're trying to get together and do naughty stuff, and that takes everybody to a better place. And then you go adding a cool slasher in there like Jason Voorhees, which I think he became real iconic when they introduced the hockey mask in part 3. But I think that's a lot of a good appeal for the Friday the 13th franchise, is the fact that it is set in the summertime. It's set at a summer camp, and that's where kids would go, to get away from it all, just to enjoy their summer, when they're out of school and their carefree summer. And then, you go to summer camp and everything goes downhill. You know what I'm saying? What do you think, Daniel?
It does not get any bigger for a 1980 slasher than for the Friday the 13th series. The first one come out in 1980, and just like what Matt was saying, it followed up with 1978 Halloween, which blew up. And for a long time, the original Halloween was the highest grossing independent movie of all time. It was finally dethroned whenever Blair Witch Project come out, but they needed something to follow in that footstep, and they've created the slasher film with Halloween. So in the documentary, they actually said, Friday the 13th was supposed to be kind of a knockoff to Halloween, and Friday the 13th just blew up in the 80s. You've got in all throughout the 80s, there's 8 sequels, I think.
Yeah.
It's 1 through 8, and they were almost making a sequel a year. I know the original come out in 1980. I think part 2 come out in 81. Part 3 come out in either 82 or 83. They were making a sequel a year just about. And I mean, for me, the first probably 6 Friday the 13th movies, it really doesn't get much better than that. When I'm wanting to watch a 1980 slasher film, I'm going to go to the Friday the 13th movies. I'm ride or die Halloween, okay, but Friday the 13th for me is so much more fun to watch. It's a fun movie to watch. It's well paced. they're not Academy Award winning movies by any means, you know, but they're just great. They're fun movies to watch.
Yeah, even though every sequel they made was basically a remake of the previous sequel, but you know, if you've got a movie that just works, don't mess with it, man. Just keep doing it. And I think that's what it was all about in the '80s, just putting something out that people wanted to go to the drive-in with their girlfriend and watch, and just have a good time doing stuff like that. Dusty, you've been awful quiet, man. Let me ask you something, Dusty. You know, if you're going to sit down and watch a Friday the 13th, which one are you going to watch?
I am in a lot of horror movies. I'm a purist. I want to go with a lot of times. I want to go with the original. In some cases, maybe the second, but not. I will absolutely acknowledge you guys are much more the experts when it comes to horror movies and stuff. But I wanted to ask you guys a question. With the sequels, because you've got, there was, you've got Jason in space, and you've got Jason, Jason X, and all that kind of stuff. With those movies generating that kind of income for that low of a budget, because like you said, they're going and finding some pretty girls, paying them some money to run around half naked, and dude kills them. Do you think to the group, I'm just curious, do you guys think, you as being more experts than I am by all means, but do you guys think the sequels, after a certain point, it almost started to cheapen it because he had to survive bigger things? He's hit with a rocket launcher and he just tanks it and just keeps going. And does it get to the point where it defies where it defies itself? It almost cheapens itself a little bit.
Well, what you're talking about?
I think this. Go ahead, Daniel, then I'll finish up.
Okay, so I'll start it off. I think that what you're more talking about is whenever it gets so campy that it's comical. And after they finished up with really about part 6, okay? And the reason why I don't personally like part 7 is because you bring in the telekinesis girl, Tina. But anyway, when it gets to the point to where you've got somebody using telekinesis against Jason, it's really too funny. They really started to kind of laugh at themselves in part 6 because it had a lot of comedic elements in it. But it was still, as far as what it was trying to do, it was still very much a Jason movie. And I think what Dusty's talking about is when it starts to lose kind of the essence of what it's trying to do. Okay, so in part 1 through part 6, it's a slasher movie with a basic concept, and it kind of follows, each movie kind of follows along with itself. After part 6, the storylines go completely haywire, and it gets very, very comical after that. You've got Jason going to New York, and you've got, Jason going to space, stuff like that. But Corky, you were going to say something, and I'll let you go ahead.
Well, you took the words right out of my mouth, baby. I was gonna say what happened. First off, part 6 is my all-time favorite, and believe it or not, close second is part 5. A lot of people hated part 5 because it wasn't really Jason in that movie, but I actually love that movie. But part 6 is my all-time favorite. I've actually been to where it was filmed. I've visited a lot of the sets, and but what happened when you start with part 7? Like you said, they start with this telekinesis stuff, and I don't know if it's because they were running out of ideas or what, but it's like I said when we first started this podcast, you got a formula. Kids, summer camp, doing stuff that kids do, and then you get killed for doing it. and that's the formula that made us popular. And they started when it got to part 7, we had to start doing different stuff. And I think that was the start of the decline of the movies Then you get to part 8, and I don't know what in the freak they were thinking when they made part 8, because all of a sudden he's in New York City, and at the end of it, some slime in the sewer gets on him, turns him back into a kid. I mean, come on, guys. Friday the 13th movies, it's simple. Summer camp, kids, Jason's there, kills kids, they kill Jason, and then the next movie, something happens and Jason comes back. They got off of that formula, and that was the downfall of the movies, because in part 9, they had him as a snake crawling around, getting in other people's mind and like basically possessing them, and the only way he could be killed is with a freaking family knife or something
Family
like that.
knife.
And it's just, I hate to see, because like I said, this is my all-time favorite franchise of movies, and I hate to see how they go downhill of those last 3 or 4 movies, because then you have Jason X and Freddy versus Jason, which, believe it or not, Jason X on its own was a pretty good movie. Freddy versus Jason on its own was a pretty good movie, but they really dropped the ball starting with part 7 was still all right, but then part 8, somebody was drunk when they wrote that movie, and I don't know what happened, whether it was some LSD or some who knows what was going on, but they were definitely on a bad trip, because whoever thought that, hey man, we'll take this toxic sludge and we'll wash it over Jason's body and it'll turn him back into a kid. Whoever thought that was a good idea?
And
Really practicing drugs is what they was practicing.
and he's going to talk, because at the end of
Did
it,
he talk in it? See, oh, he did, didn't he? Yeah, that's even. Yeah, that's terrible, man.
Like the only slasher that is allowed to talk ever. Well, there's Freddy. He's number 1. I was going to say Pinhead as well, but Pinhead's not necessarily a slasher. The Hellraiser movies are kind of a class on their own, the Cenobites. But like if you're going to talk, you can only be Freddy or Pinhead. That's it.
Yeah, I agree with that. Well, let's think about it like this. I told you guys part 5 was actually one of my favorite movies. Matt, can you give me what you think about part 5? How did you think about that movie when it came out?
I didn't like it. I hated it. It's the weakest one. I would rather watch Jason X twice naked.
Hey, let me say that Jason
Are you serious? Are you freaking serious?
No, I'm serious. I hate 5, because here's why I don't like 5. Because you get part 1. Part 1 is my favorite Friday 13th, because part 1 was just fantastic. I love part 1.
Kudos.
Then you kind of go into a story,
right,
in part 2 and 3. And then you get the hockey mask in 3. Now you're setting something up. Then you go into more storytelling when you get into 4.
Yeah.
When you get into Corey Feldman's character and stuff like that, what happens to these family.
Yeah.
Well, then you switch it and you get into 5, which, but then you get into 6, where it's Tommy. And it seemed like from 4, 5, and 6, you were dealing with a Tommy story arc. And I think had they kept that going somehow, man, it would be probably one of the best horror franchises that we ever would have seen, just because of storytelling. But I think storytelling broke down, going from what Dusty was talking about. The storytelling broke down after part 6.
Yeah, definitely.
7 was stupid, 8 was trash, 9 was ridiculous. Jason, all that is stupid. The storytelling got stopped after 6 for whatever reason, I don't know. But then it just became a cash grab, because if you throw Jason's name out there and you throw Friday 13th, it's going to make some money. Just like Halloween, just like Hellraiser, just like Texas Chainsaw, they're all going to make Chucky. They're all going to make money. But the reason I don't like 5 is I felt like the writing just was not there. It didn't draw me in. I didn't like any of the characters. They were funny parts. I loved Demon. He was great.
Yeah, that's my man right there.
Go ahead, Dusty. What are you gonna say?
I was just going to say, Matt made the point that I tried and failed unsuccessfully to make. Is it seems like, and maybe Jason's the most prominent of it. A lot of these horror movies, the slasher movies, are pretty easy to make. There's pretty fast turnaround. There's not a lot of like you said, they're not going and getting A-list actors to do this kind of stuff for the most part. So in the instance of it, like Matt was saying, you slap Jason on something and people are going to go see it. Do you think that contributed to the subsequent sequels getting worse because they were just like, hey, we can just, we're just trying to make money here, and these things generate a ton of money with
It's
not a lot of
guaranteed.
it, with not a lot of overhead, not a lot of investment. So
It's
let's just
guaranteed
pump them out, boom, 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 boom. If they're trash, they're trash. We're not trying to win an Academy Award here. We're trying to put some butts in seats.
It's almost like Marvel, because when Marvel got out of the third phase, they started pumping out shows. They started putting out just mid-card stuff, but they knew people would go see it because it had Marvel to it. Friday the 13th and even Nightmare on Elm Street and stuff like that, they had that same problem, because as long as you put the name and the title out, people are going to go watch it. It's guaranteed money. It doesn't take anything to make, and if you make 50% more of what you put into it, or 25% more, it's a win for the studio, and they got money to go throw on some other projects.
So if you go back to the original Friday the 13th, the original Friday the 13th in 1980 was a cash grab. It was, hey, let's make a movie that's kind of like Halloween because we know how well Halloween did. They said that in the documentary.
Mm-hmm.
The entire franchise was a cash grab to begin with. So, I think in the first 6 films, okay, a little more detail was put into storytelling and whatnot, just a hair. After part 6, everything started to be one-offs, and you didn't have to, quote, watch the last one to understand how Jason comes back, because now Jason is just all of a sudden back. You watch Jason Goes to Hell, and you're thinking, oh, how are they going to resurrect him out of the sewer? They didn't. He's just walking around in the woods. Go ahead, Corky.
But this is all going back to, it all ties into like, the cash grab movies and stuff like that. I think when Corey Feldman, chopped up Jason in part 4, I think he killed Jason in that movie, right?
Yes.
Jason was actually dead. And I
Yeah.
think that was because you take parts 2, 3, and 4, and they all take place in the same week. I don't know if anybody knows that, but they all take place in the same week.
They take over the same weekend.
Yeah. So, so they killed Jason. I think they was going to have that be the end of the franchise. But then, of course, it being the 80s, they're like, no, we can still make money this. So they had to figure out, okay, how we bring Jason back. And I think how part 5 came in was, well, the obvious way now is we'll visit Tommy. He's a young adult now. He's obviously traumatized from what went down in part 4, and we'll follow him, to this halfway house where he's having to live because he's got some mental problems, and we'll go the copycat killer route. Matt's point's valid. I could see how a lot of people don't like Friday the 13th Part 5. Even I didn't like it when I first watched it, but there's just so many iconic scenes in it and stuff like that. Like, who can forget the girl doing the robot in the bedroom that night? And
Madonna knockoff.
yeah, and who can forget Demon, in the outhouse singing, "Ooh baby, ooh baby."
Because he went in there because of those damn enchiladas.
Dang enchiladas, baby, praise. But so that movie, it still kept the formula of the original one, though. Even though they wasn't at a summer camp, they were still at a place where, you had teenagers that had to be there, still doing stuff we ain't supposed to do, and the formula was still there. They were still, out in the country doing stuff outdoors, and I think that's why Friday the 13th Part 5 worked. And of course, when Part 5 was successful, of course we're going to do a Part 6. So what people don't realize is up until Part 4, Jason was still like a human. And, obviously Part 5, Jason was a copycat killer. You have what was his name? Ron. What was his name?
It was, Ron or somebody was.
I don't know what his name is.
He was the ambulance driver, whoever he was. Rod.
Yeah, I forget what it is. That's the problem. I start doing this podcast, I forget everything. But then you get Part 6, and that's when we finally get zombie Jason. you know, when Tommy digs him up and sticks the pole in his chest and he gets struck by lightning, that brings him back. So up until then, you actually have Jason that he, you know, he's a human, you can kill him. But then when part 6 started, which you can, even with part 6, you can say, all right, they started going off the rails because here we've got zombie Jason now instead of just normal Jason.
Do you know what? Do you remember? And we were talking about the movies that the studio made, but did you guys see the fan made one that had Tommy in it? It was the Friday 13th in the snow.
That Don't Hike Alone. That's a good movie.
Yes, that was great. I thought that was fantastic. I was like, man, these guys get it. See, the problem with horror franchises, and me and Daniel, we've talked about this ad nauseum, is when you get different directors and you get different writers who do not watch the other movies, and the studio says, here you go, make us a movie, you get what you get with Halloween 5. You go into a house where it's not the Myers house, it's a 18th century Victorian gated lot that looks nothing like the Myers house from 1 and 2. It's like, you don't care about your fans at that point. And I think Friday the 13th, I think the storytelling was there for the first 6 movies, but after that, they just didn't care.
Don't you think that's a problem that all of the movies that we love from the 80s, that's genuinely the problem that they all faced toward the end of their run, was they just started pumping them out and didn't care what they pumped out, even with Nightmare on Elm Street. And I'm sure we'll do a show about that in sometime in the future, but look how stupid they got toward the end, you know?
They did, but the thing I was going to say about Nightmare on Elm Street, it kind of it had a story though.
Yeah.
You
And they did
follow the evolution of Freddy Krueger, of where he came from and what he really was. They weren't as good as the original. There's never going to be, in my opinion, Nightmare on Elm Street was probably the best horror movie I ever watched.
As far as true horror, yes, I agree.
I think Halloween is probably the most perfect horror movie I ever watched, if that makes sense.
But what was the scariest movie you ever watched?
Oh my God, Sinister with Ethan Hawke.
Okay. Good.
I loved it. I can't watch it by
It's
myself.
a good movie. It's not the scariest one that I ever watched, but it really depends on if I watched these movies as an adult, it'd be like whatever. But I watched a lot of these movies as a kid, and I watched them as a kid that didn't need to be watching some of that stuff. Okay? So for me, when I go back and I rewatch the Texas Chainsaw Massacre 1974, a lot of people would laugh at that because it's too fantastical for them. It's too comical for them. You know, they'd be like, "Why do you think that's scary?" When I watch it, I seen that movie for the first time when I was like 5 or 6. You know, and I watched it as a serious horror movie when I was 5 or 6, and it scared the crap out of me. And every time that I've watched that movie, I remember how I felt when I was a kid, and it just gave you this odd kind of eerie feeling, and it just creeped me out. And it still creeps me out when I watch that movie. I can watch it, you know, as an adult, you watch things and you're not like a kid, but you remember how you felt when you were a kid and you were watching that, and it makes you creeped out, or at least it does me.
That's why I can't watch Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I've watched it one time, and that's the only time I will watch it. That movie freaked me out.
It's brutal, man.
I don't like chainsaws because of that today. Don't even like hearing them.
And every haunted house you go to, you ended up getting chased by a chainsaw.
Every one.
One of them.
That's why I don't go.
That's always the last room is the chainsaw room. It never fails. At least at some point, somebody just chased me with a weed eater or something instead of a chainsaw.
Something. But I think that was, I think when you look at the Friday 13th movies, I think at least the first 6, I think you had a really good story and a really good base. But like Daniel said, when you get into 7 and you're starting to reach for telekinesis, you've run out of ideas at that point.
Yeah, and I'll say this, and this kind of is going to lead into another topic, but Part 7 had probably my favorite kill in the whole series.
What was that?
And it was when he picked that girl up in the sleeping bag and zipped her up and he started slamming her against the tree. That's probably my favorite kill in the whole thing, man. I thought that was just cool.
Yeah, you can use that in the video game too.
Yeah, they also redone it in Jason X, I believe, in the hologram scene.
They did.
Beating some girls to death in a sleeping bag. But you know what? You want to ask about favorite death scene? My favorite Jason kill is actually on Jason X when he sticks the girl's head down in the nitro. What is it? The nitro, that cold stuff, whatever it is.
Liquid nitrogen.
Yeah, liquid nitrogen, and just brings her head out and busts it on the counter.
Yeah.
What was yours, Matt?
Best kill? Oh, God. Best kill is it's two of them. It's a 2-for-1. It is the RV scene in Friday the 13th 6.
Yeah.
It's my favorite kills of all.
That was what was his name? That was Court.
Here's something about that, and I never understood. I want somebody to see if they can clarify it for me. Do you remember where his girlfriend goes into the bathroom and Jason's in there like struggling with her for some reason?
Yeah.
And he's driving, he keeps cranking up Alice Cooper.
Yeah.
And he goes, "Hey, are you back there taking a dump? You care if I come snatch a peek?"
Yeah,
What the hell is that about?
Dude, that was just some nastiness coming out of his mouth.
He just was.
Or vice versa. He says, or vice versa. Like, what? I never understood what in the hell that exchange meant.
I never really thought about it to now myself, man.
It's weird. But that whole scene though, when he's trying to get it started and he's like, "No way, this thing ain't moving."
Yeah.
And then they end up having to change the gas. It had 2 different tanks because it was an RV, and the one gas tank was empty, so they switched tanks and then it started. But that dude was sitting there, he's like, "No way, this ain't."
way.
But that scene was the great to me. That scene where they get killed and Jason, after the RV flips over and he busts the door open, he stands on top of it. I'm like, man, that whole scene was just, to me, was like the best of any of the movies right there.
Now the actual scariest kill for me was again, I seen these movies way too young. I probably seen Friday the 13th Part 2 like when I was, again, probably 6 or 7 years old. Whenever the guy in the wheelchair in Part 2 gets the machete through the face, basically, and he starts rolling down the stairs backwards in the rain, scared the crap out of me when I was a kid.
Yeah, just the fact that he's rolling backwards down the steps, man, with a knife across his face.
I was sitting there like, okay, Jason will kill a handicapped person. Okay, what you think he's gonna do with me? I'm dead.
What was Jason thinking? He's like, all right, this dude's in a wheelchair. I'm gonna kill him. Why would he kill the guy in a wheelchair?
Easy pickings.
It's easy pickings for him, man. He's like,
I mean,
you're dead.
Just kill him. You can't get up and run, so you just go ahead and kill him. What's he gonna do? Wheel off?
They killed the dude in the wheelchair in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
They don't care.
He rolls along, and dude just runs up with the chainsaw.
We don't care about your disabilities in these movies. We just go after them. There's signs of weakness.
We treat everybody the same.
In 1988, whenever Halloween 4 come out, I was 9, and the girl, Danielle Harris, was 8 in the movie, and she'd run around because Michael Myers trying to kill her. So Michael Myers kills kids, and I'm going, that's a kid my age. Okay,
hey, come on, bro.
Okay. No cap.
Yeah, no cap.
No cap. Dusty, what do you think, man? Dusty, let me ask you a question. I know you ain't like a horror aficionado, and I'm gonna be honest with you guys. I don't like horror movies at all, really. I like a few.
I love.
I know. I'm not a big horror guy.
I live and breathe horror movies. I love them.
So, Dusty, when you look at Friday the 13th, I mean, what's your takeaway from all that?
I think that, like a lot of horror movies, like a lot of movies in general, but horror movies in particular, it sounds like, just listening to you guys, that it was one of those that it became one of those franchises that became a victim of its own success.
Yeah.
The next one had to be, okay, we did this, now we've got to do this. Okay, now we did this, now we got to do this. So each one has got to be a little bit more of a step up. And I think that, coupled with, again, the movies being fairly easy and cheap to make and being able to just slam one out, and apparently writers doing copious amounts of cocaine during the 80s and be like, we're going to put him on a spaceship,
That's probably how it actually went.
and we're going to get that hot chick that was on that TV show with Kevin Sorbo. So, to me, it seems like they're victims of their own success, because they've got to make each one a little bit more, and then you start getting into the mythos, and that was sort of a question I was going to have if we ever redid, in some of these horror movies, like with Michael Myers, where you start going into the backstory and stuff. How much, where they try to expand the universe of it a little bit, does it take away from the character, where, you start getting into their backstory and, oh, they weren't loved as a child, or this happened or that happened, where when you first meet them, they're this already fully fleshed out murder machine. To me, does it matter that, they didn't get the golden egg at the Easter egg hunt, and then they just lost it, and that was the final straw, or whatever it was? But to me, it seems like I said, like Jaws and all the other, it seems like he was just a victim of his own success, and then you get, so that to me is.
Sorry.
Good worries.
No worries. That's my out music. That's me being played off stage, is what that is. That's to wrap it up.
That was Turkey and his wife. That's how they talk to each other.
Hey, it sounded better than that, baby. Praise God.
I figured it may. I figured it may. But you know what? When you look at Friday the 13th,
He says, "You gonna get it, bitch?"
I think did you guys ever watch Sleepaway Camp?
I did. Yep.
Okay, well, that was pretty much based. I mean, that was heavily influenced off Friday the 13th, which was really good. The sequels were good.
Yeah, that again, it kept to the formula of what made a good movie back in the 80s. You could not go wrong if you put a bunch of kids at a summer camp in the summer, having fun, doing things that kids do behind closed doors, and then throwing some murders in there. Hey, it wasn't a hard formula to keep, man. That's why I never understood what they started doing with Friday the 13th when they got to part 7, 8, and 9. I just like.
Well, I think it's like Dusty said. I mean, it's like you start upping the ante.
When the ante don't need to be up.
Well, I don't like the one-off thing though. It's like part 7 was a one-off, because part 7 didn't tie in any way whatsoever to part 6.
No, none.
Part 8
they even had, when part 7 came on, they had to show you the backstory of it just so they could play the movie.
Yeah.
Which took place years after part 6, because she was a little girl.
Yeah.
And part 8 was the same way. Part 8 didn't have anything to do with part 7.
You know what? Part 8, I'm going to tell you this, though. As far as the only good thing about part 8 was how it came on. Do you remember the montage?
Yeah, that was a good song.
That was just the whole going back to the other 7 movies. I was like, damn, this is really good. I thought, man, this is the way you do a clip show.
Oh, I thought you was talking about like the opening song where it was
No.
showing
No,
scene.
I'm talking about
That was a good song. I liked it.
right. I'm talking about the clips that they used to build up to where we saw Jason in where you saw the yacht
Yeah.
in the damn lake. You had you had that guy narrating, Jason. It had that camera going through the gates and going to his grave and stuff like that. I was like, man, you doing all these clips from all the other movies. I was like, man, that's like one of the best openings to a Friday the 13th I'd ever seen. You remember that, Corky?
No, I don't. I'm trying to look it up now. I don't remember how
It is one of the baddest ass openings to any movie I think I've ever seen. The guy was narrating. He's real creepy, and it's got all the kill scenes, stuff like that from the first set of movies.
Was that the one where he was like, "Few have seen him"?
Yes.
Lived.
Yeah. That to me was probably the best. That to me was the best thing they ever did in Part 8. That was the only thing about that movie that was good.
See, after they ran that montage, they might as well have ran the credits because the rest of that movie was horrible.
Trash.
Concrete, trapped by dark waters. There is no escape, nor do we want it.
Yeah, it's already got me in a mellow mood, baby.
And each other.
That's not it.
The adrenaline pumping without the terror could.
That's not it.
Oh God, no, that's
some
not
kind
it.
of porn that you're watching or something.
Yeah, you're watching some of that Goblin 6 dungeon and stuff.
Yeah, you watch
That sounded like Timu
regular.
Vincent Price from the Thriller.
Timu Vincent Price.
Oh man.
That was great. Timu Vincent Price.
Vincent Price.
Oh, that was awesome.
There's
Well,
like dollar store Vincent Price, and then there's Timu Vincent Price.
What'd you say over there?
That was the wish of Vincent Price, if anything.
Vincent Price.
So we can all agree that they screwed up the movies, right? And they just done stuff they didn't need to do. So Matt,
Yo.
who's it? Paramount comes to you and says, "Hey man, we need to fix this. Here's you X amount of dollars. Write me the script. How do you fix it?"
I don't know if you can because
You have to.
it depends on how you want to do it. Do you want to do it like they did the reboot with Jason Padalecki back in 2008?
I don't
And
think
like
you can
combine the first 4 movies? I mean, how do you want to do it? Are you talking about building, or are you talking about completely redoing it for a whole new generation?
In my opinion, and I think this is the only thing you could do. So if they came to me and they throwed me a contract down and said, "Hey, let's do this," I think you have to go back, Part 6, how it ended, and I think you have to start over right there, and kind of, and it sucks, but you kind of just have to pretend like 7, 8, 9, none of those ever exist. You just have to pick up the storyline after Part 6 ended and kind of go from there. Because up until Part 6, like we've all talked about, the story was there. You know what I'm saying? But, they dropped the ball in the outfield in the 9th inning when they made Part 7 and 8.
Yeah, you would have to go back if you wanted to do. I think that franchise, it's like Dusty said, it's a victim of its own success because it's such a legacy that if you go back and try to reboot it, people are probably not going to like it because it's a reboot or a reimagining. Or if you try to add on to it like you're talking about, yeah, you could do it and you can revolve the story, get the story back into Tommy Jarvis.
Yeah.
And maybe that's still haunting him, and maybe he needs to go see Jason dead again. I don't think you can. I'll be honest with you 100%. As a writer, I don't think I'd want to deal with it. Now, I'd deal with it for money, of course.
That's what I'm saying. But if they flop 10 million in front of you, you'd have to deal with
I'd figure something out. Yeah, for sure. I'd figure something out. I don't know what it'd be, but I'd figure something out. But I don't think you can come off doing Friday the 13th unless you really took it back, stripped it down, and started over. That's the only
either
way.
have to start over.
I think you have to. I really do. There's too many movies for you to try to retcon back in. So I think you would have to strip it completely down and let everybody know, hey, we're going to restart this. We're going to keep some of the same elements, but we're going to restart it. And we're actually going to tell a story. Let's say we're going to do a trilogy because that's what everybody's wanting to do now. Say we're going to do a Friday the 13th trilogy, really hype it up and really get the good elements, you know, get everything from Friday the 13th 1. Then you take 2, you get the Tommy Jarvis family involved.
Right.
You could do a really good trilogy, I think, doing that as a reimagining or a reboot, but I don't think you can add anything to it because I think the legacy is too long. I mean, you're talking 40 years.
Well,
And I
see,
think, yeah, I just don't think I don't think you can do it unless you strip it.
well, and you're probably right. You either have the strip method, or you got the method like they done with Halloween 2018. You just gotta act like everything else didn't matter. And in my mind, especially with Halloween 2018, I was willing to forget everything and just go with it because I love the movies that much.
I wouldn't.
But then we know what happened when they made the other 2 movies. But
Right.
there's so much more to Tommy Jarvis' story they could have explored, man. They just left it there. They
Well, I
had
think the context back in the 80s, that was the problem with horror movies. They weren't story arcs. They weren't character driven. They were okay. We're going to go from point A to point B with slasher, and that's all you need to know.
yeah.
And I'm really surprised that they even incorporated Tommy Jarvis in 5 and 6 after part 4. I mean, to me, that's great that they did that because that's at least some sort of story arc.
Well, at the end of part 4, if you'll remember when he's hugging his sister in the hospital,
Yeah.
he had them big, crazy eyes, and the camera froze in on him.
Yeah.
He was supposed to be the next Jason. That's what they were doing.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why in part 5, whenever he's at that halfway house, everybody is halfway thinking, "Oh, is it really Tommy that snapped and he's killing all these people?"
Mm-hmm.
And of course it was Roy, not
Roy,
Ron.
yeah.
Roy, that was the ambulance driver that was killing all them people. But at the end of part 4, part 5 probably hadn't been conceived yet in anybody's head, and Tommy Jarvis was supposed to be the next Jason. So I mean, you could take that question, Corky, a bunch of different directions with this like where you're going to start the next franchise. You're going to start it up after part 6 and act like 7 through 10 didn't exist, or you're going to start it after part 4, and act like parts 5 through 10 didn't exist, or are you just going to completely redo the whole thing? What they tried to do when they redid the whole thing in, I think 2010, whenever they did that Friday the 13th remake, they completely screwed that up. Because Jason was like this hermit already that was killing people, and like they didn't start it right. And so that's why I believe that movie didn't work.
Yeah. Well, and you know what? I just think they made it too dirty too. I mean, I've said this for a long time. There's nothing wrong with a little nudity and stuff like that in movies because that was the '80s. And that's just part of it. But when you can't watch a movie, when you can't sit down with your wife or your girlfriend or whoever and watch a movie without it being awkward, just a little bit too much in it, and especially back in 2009, 2010, when those movies, they were just trying to be as raunchy as they could be, and that killed that movie, the remake, that it killed that for me because they were just like, look, let's do drugs, let's just have sex, I'm like, come on, guys, just make the movie. I mean, I get you got to have a little bit of something in it because, again, that's just in the formula of making a good movie, but you can overdo it too.
Yeah.
And if it doesn't make sense, don't put it in there. You don't have to do that. But I'll ask him this, and whoever wants to take it can take it. But, you guys said Tommy Jarvis was supposed to be the next Jason.
Yeah.
Originally, Corey Feldman was going to reprise his role in part 5.
Well,
But
he did. They filmed like a 10.
Filming Stand By Me, and he couldn't. So that's why he only came back and done the cameo at the first.
Yeah.
So, but there was a script, and that he was going to do the next movie, but when he couldn't do it, they rewrote the script and just had him do a cameo in it. That's why I think part 5 was a rushed movie, because I think that the true part 5 was still written around Corey Feldman, and they changed it up because he couldn't get out of doing Stand By Me to come back and doing it. But whoever wants to take it can take it. But what do you think the storyline of that movie would have been?
I think that it would have been stupid. Because they would have tried to make Tommy Jarvis Jason, and Jason is Jason. Tommy Jarvis is not Jason, because if they continued with what they were setting up in the final chapter, Tommy Jarvis was hugging his sister, and you could see it in his eyes. He had snapped, and you just knew, okay, when they make part 5, he's going to be the new Jason. And if that's the direction that they were going, I don't think that it would have lasted.
Yeah, I don't see how they could have went that direction, because at that point, though, he's still he's like 13. You know, I don't see how they could get him the killer at 13.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I'm not sure, what all they would have tried to do with it, but Corey Feldman definitely did himself a favor by doing Stand By Me instead of
Yes, he
Friday
did.
the 13th Part 5, because Stand By Me
Made
is
the right decision on that.
he did right on that one. Matt, what do you think? What do you think that movie would have been?
God, it's hard to say.
It is hard to say.
It's hard to say because there's no telling what they had. I mean, I didn't even know what Corky had said. I'd never heard that before, so that's awesome. There's no telling what they could have come up with. Whatever we think was probably not even close.
Yeah, it could have been awesome, or it could have been like, well, that's stupid. Because his sister was still alive too, right?
Yes.
His sister was alive.
Maybe he's still living at the house with his sister. And
But see,
That's
you go into, let's say, getting into like personal trauma and stuff like that and exploring that was not what the 80s movies were about.
No.
Because when you look at, and I think we've had this conversation before, and I've said this many times, I think the 80s had the most iconic movies in pop culture, but I think the 90s had the best written character-driven movies, which came in the last probably 30 years, because all the writers and directors now took their cues and were making movies and were influenced by movies in the 90s that were more character-driven. So I think that's why you got better movies today. Well, I wouldn't say today, but I'm going to say the last 30 years versus what you had in the 80s. Because one of the best character-driven movies I remember in the 80s was The Big Chill. That was one of those movies. Stand By Me is another one. Those were the types of movies where it was character-driven. When you get into horror movies, they don't care about characters.
Well, that's what I was going to say is a horror movie isn't a character-driven movie.
No.
When you look at 90s horror movies, you're not making a horror movie anymore. Scream, to me, isn't a horror movie.
No.
Thriller.
It's not a horror movie.
That's why I said New Nightmare and Scream, both from Craven, I think were probably the smartest movies in that horror genre, because they were a different type of movie.
I mean, they were definitely unique. But when I look at especially slasher movies, they stop in the 80s. There's no more slashers in the 90s that I can think of. You had movies that was like I Know What You Did Last Summer and Scream and some of those movies, but to me they're not slasher movies.
You don't consider Scream a slasher though?
No, not really.
Corky, do you?
No, I consider Scream more of a thriller whodunit type of movie.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously he's a slasher; he's killing people, but
Yeah.
there's still that element of who did it in there. Because
Dusty nobody-
in Friday the 13th, you know who's doing the killing. You know.
That's right.
Right.
Michael Myers, you know who's doing the killing.
Yeah, I think that's
If you're
the
getting
difference.
chased around by Michael Myers, you're not going to kick him in the crotch and get away. It's not happening.
Right.
Like they were doing with Ghostface. It's not happening.
Dusty,
Sorry.
Dusty, do you see Scream as a slasher?
I see the Scream movies almost as a in a non-comedic way, almost a parody.
Mm-hmm.
That's interesting.
I see that in the same way that I don't know if anybody's. I'm sure with this bunch you have. There was a movie, Cabin in the Woods.
Yeah.
With Chris Hemsworth and stuff, where they were and Richard Jenkins, brilliant, where they were poking fun at the horror movie genres, where they had like the betting pool and stuff. They had all the they had the betting pool. What was gonna get them, and they had the tropes, the dumb jock and the final girl and the virgin and all that stuff. But I saw. I mean, I the moment that, and it broke my heart. The moment they killed Drew Barrymore, who was, an A-lister at the time, that told me exactly, to me, what that movie was going to be. This was going to be, and not not mocking parody, but it was going to be a parody of the slasher genre, because, like you guys said, there was a story to it where there didn't need to be a story. And again, that kind of goes back to something I mentioned earlier about it taking away from the mythos that surrounds these guys. That when you meet the first time you meet Michael Myers, first time you meet Jason, the first time you meet Freddy, they are these fully fleshed out murder machines. They know who does it take away from a Michael Myers when you find out that once upon a time he was an ordinary kid in an ordinary house on an ordinary street in an ordinary town? That they don't need a backstory. They just need to do what they do, and that is kill people.
Right.
And do that, and just that's their lane.
I think when you start exploring the backstories, I think that's when you start losing traction, because Myers is just like a force of nature.
Right.
Freddy, he was a child murderer. That's all you need to know. I don't, the writer in me wants a little bit backstory, but at the same time, the movie watcher, I don't really need all that exposition.
Well, when you get to, the level that me and you and Corky are watching these movies on, you kind of do. Because how many times have we talked about all these people's backstories? And how many times have we talked about, I would have liked to have seen this, or well, I would have done different. You get these hardcore fans, and there's fans out there that's even harder core than what we are.
Yeah, no doubt.
That makes us like, we think, it's cool that we know Michael Myers' middle name is Audrey. There's people out there that know his social security number and everything else. If it's
What's his blood type?
They put our knowledge to shame, okay? And they really get into this stuff. So when you start trying to write movies that's going to appeal to those people, you need a little bit of depth in that, I think. Now, they always screw that depth up whenever they attempt it. They always go in a direction that's not going to work. And to me, it's like, it's so obvious that some of these directions are not going to work, how hard is it to take somebody creepy? There's no creepier slasher than Michael Myers. This is creepy, okay?
Right.
How can you not do a backstory on Michael Myers with the current setup that Dr. Loomis has already given you?
See, I don't think you need it, though.
But
I don't think you need it then. I think nowadays, the way the movies are written now, you got to have that exposition. But I think back in '78, I think that Myers works best with very limited exposition where Loomis talks about him. To me, that works because it keeps that mysterious part about him. What is he?
But what I'm saying is, how do you take something like that and you still can't keep it creepy? You have to be stupid with it, like Rob Zombie did when he
Oh
did.
my
Go
God.
ahead, Dusty.
Oh, no, I was going to say, I didn't mean to interrupt, but I was going to ask you, you're talking about the sort of the smart fans, the ones that, they know who Freddy Krueger's third grade English teacher was, and,
Fans aren't
you know,
stupid. The ones that really
that kind of stuff. Do you think in an effort to try to appeal to those hardcore fans, the ones that really no matter what product you turn out are going to go see it, they're going to buy a ticket, they're going to stream it, they're going to do whatever. Do you do that? Do you think, all three of you, do you think they put more into those, for lack of a better word, almost the mark fans? If you want to bring a little professional wrestling terminology into it, at the expense of the more casual fan, the people like myself that are gonna be like, oh wow, this is something cool that I remember as a kid. I remember watching this. At my friend's house. We stayed up one night or something when their mom and dad were asleep. Had to listen to it on mute or had to listen to it real low, and then be like, man, this is way deeper than I wanted to go. So do you think they're in writing those that they're chasing off the casual fans who are going to be like, oh, this is kind of cool, and there's the money?
I don't think so, because if you have ever seen the movie Rounders, okay, Matt Damon says that you can shear a sheep many times, but you can only skin it once. Okay.
Right.
So what that means to me is you've got these fans that are always going to go watch this particular horror movie because they're super fans, right? So they're a small group. You say, 500 people. Okay. You can write a movie that's going to be trash that the casual viewer is going to go, oh yeah, I've seen that and I'll never go see another one because it's stupid. And you keep your 500 hardcore fans, but you lose all the money revenue from the 100,000 that would have went and saw part 2 had it been worth a shit. You know what I mean? So you have to put in a little bit of effort to keep your casual fans, and that does nothing but help the hardcore fans, in my opinion. Go ahead, Corky.
Well, here's my take on it. I agree with a little bit of both of it. I agree with like what Matt's saying. Like back in '78 when Halloween first came out, and I think like 80, 81 when Friday the 13th first came out. I don't think in those times you needed much backstory. People just wanted to go to the movies, to the drive-in, and they wanted to watch a scary movie with their girlfriend, and hopefully that it would scare their girlfriend and she'd slide in just a little bit closer to them. You know what I'm saying?
That's right.
But as these movies progress, if you're going to make more movies, I think you kind of got to give some backstory to them, because eventually nothing's going to make sense if you don't know why we keep making these movies.
That's right.
So I think like Matt said, starting out, I don't think, especially in the early '80s, late '70s, I don't think you need much backstory, because hey, we just want to go to the movies and watch some people get killed, and hopefully it'll scare my girlfriend and she'll slide in just a little bit closer to me in my seat. But like then as you go on, we try to make sequels and we try to do this and do that. We got to give a little backstory because we got to have a reason why we keep making movies. So that's my take.
Well, I think that's what goes back into what I was saying earlier with the '90s and with movies today, is that we've gotten older as a movie watching society, so we want to know backstories. That's why we criticize the movies where we've read the book because they didn't put enough of the book in the movie. We demand more exposition now than we did versus 30, 40 years ago.
Right.
So 30, 40 years ago, you can get away without having to give a whole, 3-hour backstory to a character like a Myers or a Friday 13th or a Jason and Friday 13th, whatever. You could get away with that with a couple of sentences and a couple of paragraphs. I'm fine with that. today's time, I want to know the mechanics of it. I want to know what caused it. I want to know what the triggers were. I want to know why this entity is like this.
Right. It's just
Back then, I didn't care.
days, we're different people these days.
Yeah. I
But
think
I'll
so.
say this. Speaking of the '90s, as we left the '90s, what year did Scream come out? '97, something like that.
95,
6.
96. Okay.
I'd
It's
say
something.
96. You gonna look it up, Gork? You want me to?
I can, but it doesn't really matter. But we were all in high school when it came out, and I've always credited Scream with the rebirth of the horror movie, even though
Yeah.
nowadays
100%.
I don't look at it as a horror movie, but it's still, for a while there just wasn't being many of those movies made. And I'll tell you this, you guys think about this: when Scream came out, it reignited the horror franchise. But I want you to think about that opening scene with Drew Barrymore in there popping the popcorn, and how she was killed. How brutal was that? Have you ever guys just actually watched that scene and seen how she was killed and how brutal it was? That's
Yeah.
probably one of the best opening scenes to a movie I have ever seen. What you guys
And
think?
let me tell you why that worked. Let me tell you why it was so smart to do that. It goes back to what Dusty was talking about. Drew Barrymore was an A-lister back then, and she was killed off in the first 12 minutes of the movie. So that sets the tone for the audience to say, okay, this is a slasher movie, but the A-lister doesn't save the day. Even the A-listers are getting killed. So nobody in these movies are safe. And that set the tone for what was going on.
Yeah, I agree with that too. I think when you come out in a movie and you start roasting and taking your A-listers off the roster pretty quickly, I think that sets a message to the audience that, hey, this is a different kind of movie you're watching.
It was very, very not exactly like it, but it was very similar to what they did in Psycho. Whenever Janet Leigh was the main character, okay, and Janet Leigh got killed within the first 19 minutes of the movie.
Yeah.
Nobody's safe. But what Craven was trying to do back then, in '96, whenever Scream come out, he killed the A-lister. He was trying to set a tone saying it don't matter who you are. This is a new breed of horror movie that we're making. This isn't your 80s slasher where everybody gets killed except the A-lister.
Yeah.
This type movie, even the A-listers get killed, so you never know what to expect. And that's kind of how they ran with it. Go ahead, Dusty.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead, Dusty.
Okay, I'm sorry. I was just going to touch too. We talked earlier, Corky. I think you mentioned it too, that there was that established formula.
Yeah.
You got the teenagers. They're doing naughty things. The killer shows up, murders them, lather, rinse, repeat. And then you've always got the final person. It's a horror movie trope, the final girl, the virgin, whatever. With not to divert this into Scream, but the way they had Drew Barrymore dressed, she had the blonde hair, the blue eyes, all American girl wearing white. So it was a sort of a nudge to the virgin, the final girl, and she's the first one that gets knocked off.
No.
Yeah.
Give Wes Craven credit for doing horror movies the way he did, because he brought two big franchises that were landmarks in horror with Nightmare on Elm Street and Scream. What other director can do that? None. I mean, Carpenter, he did a lot of movies across the board, so he didn't just stay in horror. Craven, not only did he do Nightmare on Elm Street and had that franchise going, he also comes out with a different one when A New Nightmare came out, which I think New Nightmare is probably one of the smartest horror movies ever made.
Absolutely.
And then you've got him at Scream, which is still going today.
Yep.
Because of that formula that it could be anybody.
And you know what? They're kind of falling into the same trap that the rest of these movies have fallen into because they're starting to get a little stupid. You know, we're telling the same story over and over and over again.
Yeah.
Uh,
Because you
I'll
can't,
say this.
how many more times can you tell the Scream story?
Well, you know what? I've got the answer to the Scream franchise. I think at the end of it,
Billy Loomis is really alive the whole time.
I think Sydney, it has to end up being the final killer.
You
Because,
think
you know
Sydney's
what?
still being a final killer?
Because you know what? She's been through all this trauma. She's been through like I've almost killed 20 times. So eventually she's gonna flip and she's gonna become the killer and it all ends with her.
What's that old expression? You either die the hero or you live long enough to become the villain.
I say
That's right, yeah.
Gail Weathers is the last killer.
Jamie Kennedy's coming back.
Jack Kennedy comes back and says, "Man, I told y'all. Did I not explain the rules to you?
You've got to follow the rules.
You've got
This
to
was the
follow
hidden
the
rule.
rules."
But I think Friday 13th, I think, you know, to look at it, I think Friday 13th really it's got a strong following. It's got a really good foothold in cinema history, in horror too, in that subgenre. So I really think that when you talk about horror movies, you've got to always talk about Friday 13th. And I don't think Friday 13th would have been as good had it not been for the hockey mask.
No, it definitely wouldn't have. The hockey mask is what, all right, it's what put Jason on the map. If they had never brought the hockey mask out, and like I told y'all before, the hockey mask thing was an accident. They knew they were going to have Jason in the water, and Tom Savini or whoever it was that was doing the special effects, like, this ain't going to look right with this, you know, burlap sack coming out of the water. And I think how the story goes, he's like, I got a hockey mask in my car. And he actually had a hockey mask in his car. So he goes to his car, gets it, and I don't know whether they tweaked it or whatever they done. That's how they finally got the hockey mask. He just had it laying in his car. And that's what they went with because it would look better coming out of the water.
Well, they made the right decision because the hockey mask made the entire franchise.
And it goes like if Michael Myers had never wore the spooky white mask, I don't think he would have been as popular.
No, they had they sent the makeup guy to the Halloween store and he brought back 2 masks and he brought back a clown mask, which was scary in its own right. And they brought back the William Shatner mask. And they had Nick Castle, who played Michael Myers, wear both masks for him. And the first one that he put on was the clown mask. And they said, yeah, okay, that could work. He put on the William Shatner mask, and they were like, that's it. That's the mask.
Think about this. Do you think Freddy Krueger is ever as popular as he was if he would just had a butcher knife or if he had the glove?
You know, I think I would say yes if he took his glove, his knives off his glove. I'd still think you could say that would diminish the character. But for Krueger to actually get into your dreams and wear that sweater and that hat, I still think there's too much iconic stuff tied up to Freddy Krueger that you could lose the glove and he still would be spooky.
Yeah, because he still had the whole element of I'm gonna come kill you in your dream, and who cannot sleep? You have to sleep, you know.
Yeah.
Right. So I think even if you lose the glove, which enhanced everything else, but I think if you lose the glove, you still good with
You still
Freddy.
got a good movie, but I think the glove, man, that glove just made it. It's like,
I think the glove is what set it off. Yeah, but I'm mad. It probably still would have done good, but the glove really made it iconic.
Yeah.
all right,
Oh,
so
yeah. I think so.
we hadn't covered this part yet, but Corky, give me your favorite Friday the 13th movie.
Part 6. It's a no-brainer for me. Part 6.
Right, Matt, you've already said part 1. Is that what you?
Part 1 is my all-time favorite because there was just something, to me, there was just something simple about it, and I love the way it was. It was just, you know, it was kind of Scream before Scream because you didn't know who was going around the camp killing these guys. You didn't know who it was. It could have been any one of them.
I'm with you.
So, and I really like that element.
And my personal favorite is part 4.
Part
Mhm.
4 is good.
Yeah.
Dusty, what's yours?
Dusty, did you have a favorite one?
I think I've only seen maybe the first one or two. I will tell you one of my favorite. I know, but there was a scene in the first one, and I think it was Debbie Reynolds that played the mom or something, where she's got the girl in the car with her, but you hear Jason's voice coming out when Jason was a kid, screaming, "Kill her, mommy, kill her."
Yeah.
And then and that to me, because like you said, here's this little old lady looks like a grandma. You pass a million of them, you see a million of them in Walmart, and she's taking out big dudes.
Betsy Palmer is her name.
Betsy Palmer. Okay. I don't know why I said Debbie.
She said that
Looks like
Debbie Reynolds.
she said that the only reason why she even did that movie was because she needed money for a car. And so back then, I think she got like $5,000 or some little chump change, whatever. And she said that bought her a car at the time. And that's the only reason she did
It's probably, you figure with inflation, $5,078, $77, that's probably what, about 20 grand now, give or take.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
But it's funny little stories like that it's just really cool,
I would put part 6 is probably, if I had to pick a second, it's part 6.
So I was going to say, give me your top 3, Matt.
Top 3 would be 1, 6, and 4.
1, 6, and 4. Corky, what do you say?
Ooh, 6, 3, and 5.
All right.
Because the first time I'd ever seen Friday 13th 3 was at Corky's house. I spent the night with him.
Yeah.
And he goes, "Man, it's going to freak you out. It's in 3D. It was the old VHS tape, so we popped it in. And me and him just sitting in his room chilling, watching Friday 13th 3D. And I think I was like in 6th grade when I first saw that with him.
I remember you had that recorded or something, because I went over to your house, Corky, and I watched Friday 13th Part 3.
Yeah, I had the VHS back in the day.
It was like, then this crap here, and then the spear.
Yeah.
But my top 3 is going to be 4, 3, and 2 in that order.
Nobody put 1 in there?
Oh,
I've not seen 1 a lot. It's a good movie. There's nothing wrong with it. I've just not seen it a lot.
But it didn't have Jason in it.
Yeah. Yeah, that kind of does it for me. It didn't have Jason in it. But let me tell you, the reason why Part 6 is one of my favorite. It's my favorite one because they dig Jason up. And I remember growing up, dude, I was infatuated with what's he going to look like? What's he going to look like when they dig him up? And then you had all the worms and stuff. Well, no, that was Part 5 when they done the worms, wasn't it?
No, that's 6.
I think they had the worms in both.
Anyhow, when they dug him up and you could see actually what Jason would look like because he'd been dead for so many years or whatever, I thought that was cool. And the fact that he looked cool in that movie, and they tried. Part 6 was the first time they tried to add a little comedy into it. Because if you'll remember when he slams the guy that's playing paintball up into the tree, it leaves a smiley face on the tree and stuff like that. It's just a good movie. And then I remember all the iconic lines like "Wherever the red dot goes, you bang" and all that stuff.
Oh God, yes, loved Rick. Rick was so good.
Yeah, it's my favorite movie. Anything else we need to cover before we cut out of here tonight?
I'm trying to think because Friday was.
I could sit here.
Has that franchise reached over $1 billion?
I'm sure that it has.
You think over at the box office? You think it hit $1 billion?
I'm sure that it has. Even if you take out the remake from 2010 and all that.
Oh, I do want to say one thing about Friday. The video game was great. Still is great.
Here's my deal with the video game. I really like playing the video game, but the video game doesn't have a single player storyline to it.
Yeah, it does.
Like it's almost like a hack or something to be able to. It wasn't supposed to be one player. It was always supposed to be multiplayer. That's why when you play it on one player, you can't level Jason up.
No, you go do his little missions.
Yeah, and you
Yeah,
can't.
I like doing that.
Like you could level him up whenever you played online. That's why I don't like online only.
I don't either.
Like with the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, that game is a fantastic game if you're playing with, 5 or 6 of your buddies. If
Yeah.
you're trying to play it one player, it don't have a one player campaign on it.
No.
So
No, those games were meant to be online only.
So yeah, so like you can't just turn it on and start playing. I can't play Texas Chainsaw Massacre anymore because I never played it enough to level my players up. And so whenever I get into a room and everybody starts picking the characters, they see me at level 0 and nobody wants to play with me.
Yeah,
And so now I bought the game and I can't play it.
that sucks.
They need to fix that because that's bull crap.
But
guys,
that's what-
I was listening to you guys talk, but I was looking it up. According to this, as of December 28, 2023, the Friday the 13th franchise has grossed $464 million worldwide. So it made less than half of what in-game did.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's crazy. I thought
the
didn't
first
know
one,
what it did.
the original actually made the most. It made almost $60 million worldwide. The rest of them, the 2009 film grossed 92.7 on a budget of 19 million.
I'm
But
getting
the
908.4 million domestically, making it the second highest grossing horror movie franchise in the United States, behind Halloween, which has grossed 1.9 million. So who knows? This is according to what website I read.
But I think I figure that the new Halloween game is going to probably be in the same vein as Chainsaw and Friday, because
Can
it's
we
going to
discuss
probably
this
be
5 minutes?
If it's online only, I'm not even gonna waste my money.
Well,
I'll
here's
say it will be.
You can't
here's-
play these games.
Listen to me for a second. When they're going to create a game like Friday the 13th, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, or hopefully the new Halloween game, because I told you they're coming out with 2. The first one they've done announced, it's going to be a 16-bit side scroller, which is stupid. Who wants to play that freaking game? Nobody. But you can't make a game unless it is online, or because they can always put bots in the game, and you, as Michael, you go try to chase down babysitters or whatever. But I don't think that would be any fun. The only way you could make a game like Halloween or Friday the 13th is that it has to be online, because you have to play other people and they hide from you, or AKA you hide from Michael and try to survive. There's really not another way to make it. I don't know how you would do a campaign or anything like that.
Well, you got to put some creativity in it. You're going to play
it.
You're going to play as Laurie Strode. Well, Laurie Strode's she's going to babysit. She's got to get items to get herself out of situations. She's got to keep the kids alive. She's got to divert Michael. If you play as Jamie from part 4, you're running for your life in a school. You have to figure out how to get out of the school.
I mean, you could definitely make it. I'm not saying you couldn't make it, but
I'm just saying when it's to the point to where you're relying on, Texas Chainsaw Massacre is a 6-player game. When I am relying on 5 other live people for me to be able to play my game and enjoy it,
you're right.
Then it's bogus, because when everybody else is level 99, they don't want to play with somebody that's level 0 that don't know what they're doing, because it messes their game experience up.
And you know what, though?
I won't play with
That's a flaw in that game. That's a flaw in that game. That should have never been. That should have never been. A part. Your level should not be a part of. Nobody should even know that. If they have the ability to back out of a game and you can't play because you're too low of a level, that's the game. They need to fix that.
I've tried to play that game a couple of times over the last 6 months, and both times the game is timed out because nobody else will get in the game that I'm in. And so I can't play. It just goes back to the title screen.
Yeah, that's a flaw. They need to fix that because you pay money for the game and you should be able to play it anytime you want to.
That's right.
Yeah, I like a game where you can just turn it on and play it, not have to sit there and wait and play with a bunch of people on the line and all this. I mean, I know that's where it's at. I know that's where it's at.
That's where the money is.
Those games, that night me and you played Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Daniel, we had a ball because we would hang out at the fence and
everybody else was level 0 just like us.
Yeah, but that was when the game first came out.
Right.
And it was fun because me and Daniel go hide in some bushes and wait for somebody to run by and we'd jump out and try to kill them or they'd try to kill us or something. Yeah. And it was fun. But, as long as you're playing with your buddies, it'd be fun. But like you said, if that's the point where if you're not high enough level, everybody can just pick, I don't want to play with this guy. That's bullcrap. They need to fix that.
Yeah.
But then you get into these things like Call of Duty where you have to start hitting these paywalls.
Yeah,
like if you want to go do something else, pay $10, $15.
I bought the game. I'm not paying no money to level up. I'm not paying no money to get a better gun.
That's exactly what I say.
Let me tell you,
I quit playing Call of Duty. I don't play Call of Duty.
The downfall of Call of Duty, especially for me, because it comes out in October this year. The new game comes out, and I get it free on Xbox. I don't have to buy it. I get it free. Well, here's the problem with that. I come home after work, and you know what? I want to eat some chips and drink a Mountain Dew and play some Call of Duty, right? Yep. Well, every time I sit down and cut my Xbox on, I've got a 50 gigabyte update I got to do. So eventually, it takes up your whole hard drive, and you can't have anything but Call of Duty on your Xbox because every time you literally cut your Xbox on, it ain't like a 1 gigabyte update. It's always a 50 or 60 gigabyte update, and you can't play it unless you constantly leave your Xbox on, let it constantly update, and because if you let's say you ain't played a game in a couple of weeks, and you come home after working all day on a Thursday, and you want to eat some Doritos and drink some Mountain Dew, you sit down in your underwear and you ready to play some games. Oh, I can't play for 3 hours because I've got a 60 gigabyte update.
But that's what forces you to buy those stupid terabyte hard drives.
Extra hard drive. But it's still, though, you can't come home.
You shouldn't have to, is the point. You shouldn't have to buy all that extra stuff to play a game. You should be able to,
you don't have to buy it. It's just you have to update it. Yeah. Call of Duty, every time a new one comes out, I'm like, all right, I'm going to get into this one. I'm going to play it. Well, and it never fails. 2 weeks into it, I'm like, my God, another update? And so you don't have to buy these updates. They just do it. But still, you know how it is. You sit down and you're ready to play games. You want to play. You don't want to wait 3 hours for an update to do.
Right.
That's why I got out of Call of Duty, because it, just like what you were saying, and plus the paywalls and stuff, I'm like, you're forcing me pretty much to buy the game, but then I got to re-buy it like 2 or 3 more times to upgrade to be able to be competitive.
No, I'm not
doing that. I quit doing it.
I haven't played Call of Duty. Dude, it's been 2 or 3 years, and it's because of that crap right there. I'm not going to do it.
And I also don't like subscription-based play either.
No.
Because if I buy a game, it's mine.
Right.
I'm not going to rent a game forever. You know what I mean? Like,
No.
I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to rent a game for the rest of my life.
Yeah. Shoot, well, we can get into this video game, and that's another podcast for another time.
That's a whole other podcast.
Yeah, but I think we've covered the Friday the 13th series and slasher series and movies pretty good, man. I think that was a good show, man. What do y'all guys think?
I got one more question before we get off. Last question for me. What part was the ugliest Jason? Give me your ugliest Jason.
I have to go with the burlap sack Jason part 2.
That's what I was going to say. Either that or part 3. Man, that was ugly right there.
Oh, I'm going kid Jason. I'm going first Jason from the water.
The one that comes out of the water and then takes the girl under.
He's all messed up.
What about part two, Jason, when he jumps through the window at the end?
That's what I
Oh,
was saying.
where I look like that,
Yeah,
where I look
Jason.
like part two when I got into the poison ivy.
You did. You look like Jason Part 2. Like Jason Part 2 had on a like a flannel shirt that's about this color when he jumped through the window.
Yeah.
And he's got like this half beard and he's got red hair. Jumped through. It's funny. That's the ugliest Jason right there. That is part 3. Part 3 Jason's pretty ugly too.
Yeah, he was just a tall, goofy, stupid looking dude in part 3, man. Oh man. Well, hey y'all,
Somebody
good show.
in the head with the axe and they still throw their arms up like this. No, I'm done.
All right, guys. Hey, good show, man. Everybody, we'll be back next week. Don't know what the topic is, but we'll figure it out. Thanks for everybody tuning in. If you got anything you want to ask us about, thedewbash@outlook.com. We'll see everybody next week. Everybody say bye.
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 See ya. Heck yeah, baby.
Cue the
Y'all
music.
think?
Do-do-do-do-do-do-do.
Yeah, they tuned in, it's the thedewbash rolling deep. Mic check like that, fine, let's hit a beat. Voices flowing like the river, knowledge on the spree. Every episode a journey, come ride with me. Just hit play, it's a vibe, can't you see? The thedewbash, we breaking it down from the underground to the top of the town.